Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins. The night hung heavy over the Redanian borderlands. A sky of low, bruised clouds, whispering rain across the moors. Somewhere in that wide and silent dark, a lone horse plodded along a muddy road, its hooves sinking deep into the mire. Upon its back rode a white-haired man with 2 swords slung across his back and a wolf's head medallion at his throat. Geralt of Rivia rode with the patience of one accustomed to long, thankless roads. His cloak was soaked through, and the scent of wet earth filled his lungs. He was heading east toward the village of Rudnik, where rumor said something ugly had begun to stalk the night. A beast that left its victims torn apart, drained, and burned with alchemical fire. But it wasn't the monster that had caught his interest. Monsters were his trade, after all. It was the rumor that the creature's victims had all been witchers. He had dismissed it at first. Witchers rarely crossed paths, and when they did, few enough were killed by mere beasts. Yet the whispers persisted, reaching him through a tavern in Cadwin, through a peddler on the Pontar crossing, through a frightened alchemist in Tredagor. A hunter, they said, a man who killed witchers, methodically, cruelly, with knowledge of their weaknesses. The horse snorted as thunder rolled in the distance. "Easy, Roach," Geralt murmured. The animal tossed her head, but obeyed, trudging onward through the muck. A light flickered ahead. A wayside inn, its sign swaying in the rain. The sable mare. He dismounted, tethered Roach beneath the shelter, and stepped inside. The warmth hit him like a wall, thick with smoke and roasted meat. A few travelers huddled around the hearth, muttering. The innkeep looked up, eyes widening, as he took in the swords and the cat's eyes gleaming beneath the hood. "Witcher," the man said softly. Geralt nodded, brushing rain from his cloak. "Ale, bread, information." The innkeep swallowed. Information's dearer than ale these days. Geralt tossed a silver coin across the counter. "I pay my debts." The man snatched it up and leaned closer. "Folk say you're too late. Another of your kind was found 3 nights ago, up in the ruins by the old mill. A Griffin School lad from the look of his medallion. Dead as winter, burned clean through the chest." Geralt's jaw tightened. "Name?" "Didn't catch it. The guards dragged what was left of him to Rudnik for the Reeve to see. Best you go there if you want answers." Geralt drained the ale in silence. The fire cracked, spitting resin. Around him, the tavern's talk had gone quiet. "Was he hunting something?" Geralt asked. The innkeep shrugged uneasily. "If he was, it found him first." By dawn, the storm had thinned to drizzle. Geralt rode for Rudnik, following the river road through marshland and birch forest. The world smelled of wet moss and decay. When the village came into view, a cluster of thatched roofs under a gray sky, he felt the weight of eyes on him. Farmers paused in their work to stare. Children hid behind fences. He found the Reeve in a squat timber hall, hunched over a ledger. The man looked up sharply when Geralt entered. "Another one," the Reeve muttered. "I've had enough of your kind bringing trouble here." Geralt set a coin on the table. "I'm not bringing trouble. I'm trying to find who is." The Reeve hesitated, then sighed. "Follow me." They crossed the muddy square to a small shed behind the hall. The door creaked open to reveal a body laid out on a table. A witcher, his armor blackened, his chest burned through as if by molten metal. Geralt stepped closer. The scent of alchemical reagents lingered, vitriol, rebus, and something rarer still, phthalate, a poison known only to witchers and their teachers. Geralt knelt. The medallion still hung around the man's neck in a griffin, tarnished but recognizable. He remembered the face barely. Marek of Ban Ard, a sharp-tongued witcher, who'd once mocked Geralt's wolfish silence during a contract years ago. Geralt stood slowly. Who found him? Hunter from the hills. Said he heard screams by the old mill. When he went to look, there was nothing but this. No tracks, no beast, no sign of struggle. Geralt's eyes narrowed. He burned from within. That's no beast's work. I mean someone knew what they were doing. He turned to leave, but the reeve stopped him. Witcher, if you find who did this, don't bring more death to my doorstep. Geralt gave no answer. That evening he followed the trail to the ruins near the mill. The stone arches jutted from the earth like broken teeth, covered in ivy and shadow. The air was still. Geralt drew in a breath, muttered a sign, and the faint shimmer of Ard rippled through the brush. No movement, no scent save rain and old smoke. Then he saw it, a circle scorched into the ground. Runes etched in dried blood. The residue of alchemy. He crouched, touching a faint mark burned into the stone. The sigil of the trial of grasses. The ancient rite that made witchers what they were. Only one who knew it intimately could have drawn it. A whisper of steel came from behind him. Geralt turned in a heartbeat, blades flashing free. But there was no one. Only a voice, low and mocking, carried by the wind. Too late, White Wolf. Always too late. Geralt's medallion trembled, reacting not to magic, but to something darker, something human and twisted by pain. He stared into the shadows of the ruin where the voice had come from. And for the first time in a long while, Geralt felt hunted. Morning came pale and cold. Mist curled low across the meadows, clinging to the reeds and the river's edge. Geralt rode through it, silent as the dawn, his thoughts grim. The voice from the ruins had not been an echo nor trick of wind. It had spoken his name, White Wolf, and it had known precisely where he would be. The trail, faint though it was, led westward. Broken reeds, a boot print pressed into the mud, and traces of blood too dark to belong to any beast. He followed until the sun climbed high and the mist burned away. The land opened into a hollow between low hills, and there, at the edge of a birch grove, he found signs of a camp. Ashes scattered, a scrap of leather armor, and beside it a medallion hammered into ruin. A viper's head. Geralt crouched and turned the broken medallion in his hand. The school of the Viper had been scattered decades ago, their fortress destroyed during the purges. Few of their kind remained, and those who did lived in shadows, hunted by kings and witchers alike. Viper, Geralt murmured. So it's true then, a witcher killing witchers. He pocketed the fragment, stood and listened. The woods were still, but beneath that stillness he sensed a faint presence, a human heartbeat, quick and close. He turned slowly. Come out. A figure stepped from behind a tree, a young woman in a hunter's cloak, bow in hand, her hair tangled from the forest. Her eyes widened at the sight of his swords. I meant no harm, she said quickly. I thought you were one of them. Geralt raised a brow. One of who? The ones that came through 3 nights ago. 2 men cloaked in black. eyes like yours. They camped near here, asked about the roads to Rudnik. One carried a silver sword, the other, gods, I don't know what he was. He smelled of burnt oil and herbs. Geralt took a slow step forward. Where did they go? Toward Caer Velen, up in the old hills. Folk don't go there. Cursed place, they say. He nodded once. You've done me a service. Leave these woods before dark. She hesitated. Are you hunting them? Yes. Then you'll need luck. Geralt almost smiled. Luck runs out faster than steel. By nightfall, he had reached the foothills. The forest thickened into pines, and the wind carried the scent of rain and lightning. The ruins of Caer Velen lay somewhere above, an abandoned keep where witchers once trained apprentices before the conjunction of the spheres had thrown the world into chaos. Few remembered it now, and fewer still dared approach. As he climbed the narrow path, Roach snorted and halted. Geralt's medallion vibrated, faint but steady. Magic hung in the air, old, unstable, like an echo of broken spells. He dismounted, drew a torch from his saddlebag, and advanced on foot. The keep loomed out of the dark, its towers jagged against the stars. The gate had long fallen, the courtyard swallowed by weeds and bone-white thistles. He moved through the ruins, step by careful step, until the light of his torch caught something glinting, symbols carved into the stone, the same runes he had seen at the mill. Trial of Grasses, he muttered. Someone's been recreating it. He crouched beside a stone basin half filled with rainwater. The scent of ether and vermilion rose faintly from it, ingredients used in witcher mutations, yet the mixture was crude, unstable, and deadly. From the shadows came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate. Geralt rose, steel sword ready. Show yourself. A man stepped into the light. His hair was black, streaked with gray, his face lined by scars, his eyes reflecting the same golden hue as Geralt's. He wore no armor save a tattered jerkin and a medallion that had once belonged to the School of the Bear. Geralt of Rivia, he said. His voice was hoarse, like gravel ground underfoot. I wondered when you'd come. Geralt studied him carefully. You know me. That saves time. I don't know you. You knew me once. My name was Keldrin. We trained together at Kaer Morhen before your trial succeeded, and mine did not. Geralt's brow furrowed. A faint memory surfaced, a boy screaming during the mutations, thrashing against the straps, blood boiling beneath his skin. Few survived the trial of Grasses. Most died. Some were cast out, half-changed, twisted by the toxins. Keldrin, Geralt said quietly. You were presumed dead. Keldrin's mouth twisted into something like a smile. Dead to the witchers, perhaps, but death wasn't so kind. I lived, and what a mercy that turned out to be. I learned the truth of our kind. You've been killing witchers, Geralt said. Not killing, Keldrin replied. Purging? They made monsters of us, Geralt. You, me, all of them. And what do monsters do when the world turns against them? They consume their creators. Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. You blame the schools for what the world did, for what you became. I blame them for pretending to be saviors while creating abominations. Look around you. I've rebuilt the trial, perfected it. No boys will die screaming anymore. Only witchers, your kind, will feed the fire that makes something new. Geralt's eyes narrowed. You're making more like you. Keldrin nodded. A new generation. Not bound by contracts or kings. True hunters, free of coin and code. He took a step forward, and the torchlight revealed the scars that lined his arms. black veins pulsing faintly beneath the skin, as if the mutations still burned inside him. "You're sick," Geralt said. "The alchemy's eating you alive." Keldrin laughed, a sound hollow and cold. "Perhaps. But tell me, Wolf, how many children did your masters kill before they made you? Do you even remember their faces?" The words struck like a blade. Geralt said nothing. "I thought not," Keldrin sneered. "That's why you'll never stop me. You still believe there's honor in what we are." Geralt moved first, swift as the strike of a serpent. Steel flashed. Keldrin parried with impossible speed, catching the blade on a silver dagger. Sparks burst. They circled in the ruins, metal ringing through the night. Keldrin fought like a witcher and something more, his movements erratic, strength unnatural. Geralt countered with the Sign of Ard, flinging him back into the stone wall. The impact shattered rock, but didn't slow him. "You can't kill what's already dead inside." Keldrin roared, lunging again. Their swords met, locked, each man straining. For an instant, Geralt saw in Keldrin's eyes not rage but sorrow, deep, old, and human. Then the moment was gone. Keldrin broke free, slashed once, drawing blood along Geralt's shoulder, and leapt back into the dark. "Next time, White Wolf," his voice echoed through the ruin. "Next time we'll finish the hunt." The night swallowed him. Geralt stood alone among the stones, breathing hard, blood dripping into the dust. His medallion was still vibrating faintly, as if warning him that this was only the beginning. He looked toward the mountains where dawn was beginning to pale the sky and whispered to no one, "Then the hunt begins." The dawn came sullen and colorless, mist trailing over the slopes like torn veils. Geralt bound the cut on his shoulder with a strip of linen and chewed a piece of dried mandrake root against the ache. The pain was dull and deep, a reminder of how close Keldrin's blade had come to finding his heart. He crouched beside the blackened basin once more, studying the mixture that frothed faintly within. The scent of mutagens was unmistakable, the same base used in the ancient Witcher trials, yet altered, corrupted by unstable alchemy. He scooped a trace of the residue into a small vial, corked it, and slipped it into his pouch. Triss or Vesemir would know more if he ever made it back to Kaer Morhen. But for now the trail remained open, and Geralt's task was clear. Find where Keldrin had gone and what he intended to do next. The path down the hill was strewn with stones slick from the night's dew. Roach waited where he had left her, stamping the ground impatiently. Geralt mounted and turned toward the valley road, riding until the keep's broken towers vanished into the mist behind him. By mid-morning he reached a market village called Draven. Smoke from its chimneys curled lazily into the pale sky. The villagers eyed him warily as he passed, their expressions a blend of suspicion and weary curiosity. He had long grown used to that look, the gaze people gave a man they half believed to be a curse. Outside the inn, a heavy-set soldier in Redanian colors stood warming his hands by a brazier. The man straightened as Geralt approached. "You there, Witcher," he said. "You'd best move along. We've had enough devilry in these parts." "I'm here to ask questions, not cause trouble." The soldier spat into the dirt. "That's what the last one said. Tall fellow, black hair, eyes like yours. We found him 2 days later, torn apart in the marshes." Geralt's pulse slowed. "Where?" The man jerked his thumb toward the east. "Out past the old quarry, but I wouldn't go poking around. Whatever did it's still out there, they say." Geralt dismounted. "If it's still out there, it's my concern." He left Roach tethered and followed the trail through thickets and reeds until the ground turned spongy beneath his boots. The air grew heavy with the smell of rot. Marsh gnats swarmed thickly, and somewhere a frog croaked, its voice muffled in the fog. Then he saw it, a shape half sunken in the mud, armor stripped, face torn beyond recognition, but the medallion still clung to the corpse's neck, bearing the sigil of the cat. Geralt crouched. The wounds were too clean for a monster's work. The cuts precise, the fatal strike driven between the ribs. Someone had killed this witcher with professional skill, then scattered the remains to mimic a beast's attack. Keldrin again, no doubt. But why leave the body here? Why draw attention? Unless the killing served another purpose, a message or a warning. He heard movement behind him and turned, blade flashing free. A boy stood there, no older than 15, clutching a fishing spear. His eyes widened in terror. "Don't kill me," he cried. "I didn't steal nothing." Geralt lowered his sword. "Easy. You saw who did this?" The boy shook his head rapidly. Not all of it. Just heard the shouting. 2 men. One was the dead one there, and the other, his voice was strange, like he was sick inside. Then there was light, blue like witch fire, and I ran. You saw which way he went? The boy pointed toward the riverbank. North, into the marsh. Nobody goes there. Not since the old lab burned. Lab? Belonged to some mage years ago. Folks say it's cursed now. Smoke still rises there even when it rains. Geralt tossed the boy a coin. "You've been helpful. Go home." The boy hesitated. "You going after him?" Geralt nodded. "Then may the gods help you, Witcher." The marsh deepened into a labyrinth of reeds and stagnant pools. The smell of sulfur thickened as Geralt drew closer. His medallion began to quiver, faintly at first, then stronger with each step. He drew his silver sword, whispering a sign beneath his breath. The faint blue shimmer of Quen encased him in a shell of light. Ahead, smoke rose from a blackened ruin half swallowed by the mire. The remains of a tower, shattered stone and warped metal, leaned against the hillside like a wound in the land. He entered cautiously. The floor was strewn with glass shards, retorts, and shattered flasks. The air shimmered faintly, heavy with latent energy. Alchemical symbols covered the walls, drawn hastily, as if by a hand both desperate and unsteady. On a work table, amid dust and soot, lay a parchment filled with notes written in a tight, slanted script. Geralt scanned the words, his frown deepening. Subject stable, mutagenic infusion successful at 2nd stage. Requires additional material, medullary extract from mutated witcher tissue. The wolf's blood shows promise. The process nears completion. He set the parchment down slowly. Keldrin wasn't just recreating the trials. He was improving them, using the remains of slain witchers to craft new mutagens. Something moved behind him. Geralt spun, blade ready out, but instead of Keldrin, he found himself facing a grotesque silhouette rising from the mud. The creature was vaguely human, its flesh mottled with alchemical burns, its eyes milky and wide. Tubes of twisted bone jutted from its shoulders, pulsing faintly with green light. A failed experiment or perhaps a victim. It lunged with startling speed. Geralt sidestepped, slashing low, the blade bit deep, spilling black ichor that hissed on the stones. The creature shrieked, striking with claws that glanced off the shield of Quen. Geralt countered with a sign of Igni, flame roaring from his palm. The thing convulsed, screeched once more, and collapsed into ash. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal. Geralt wiped his blade clean. The corpse crumbled almost immediately, leaving nothing but the smell of burned alchemy. He sheathed his sword and turned to leave, but stopped. On the wall, half hidden by soot, a mark had been burned into the stone, the sigil of the bear Keldrin school, and beneath it written in blood, "The fire cleanses all." Geralt stared at the words until the last flicker of his torch died. Then he whispered into the darkness, "Keldrin, what have you done?" Outside, thunder rolled across the marshes, and the rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, washing away the ash and footprints alike. By the time Geralt mounted Roach once more, dawn had faded into gray. The path ahead was long, and somewhere beyond the hills, a mad witcher continued his work, building an army out of the corpses of his own kind. Geralt turned north, following the river. His medallion trembled again, faint but steady. The hunt was far from over, and this time the prey was not a monster born of chaos. It was a man who knew exactly how witchers lived, fought, and died. And that, Geralt thought grimly, made him the most dangerous monster of all. The northern roads wound like veins through wild country, dense pine forests, where mist clung low and the smell of damp moss hung heavy in the air. Geralt rode at a steady pace, Roach's hooves muffled on the soft earth. The witcher's shoulder ached beneath the bandage, but pain was a familiar companion, and he paid it little heed. He was heading toward the fortress town of Marnadal, the nearest settlement large enough to have seen strangers passing through. Keldrin would need supplies, ingredients, weapons, coin, and Geralt knew the kind of places a man like that would haunt. Alchemists who asked no questions, merchants with shady wares, scholars dabbling in forbidden crafts. By dusk, the towers of Marnadal rose before him, their silhouettes black against the red sky. The town squatted atop a rocky bluff, its walls streaked with soot from 1,000 forge fires. As Geralt approached the gate, 2 guards stepped forward, spears crossed. "State your business," one demanded, his breath steaming in the chill. "Work," Geralt replied curtly. "Monsters, contracts, whatever needs doing." The guards exchanged glances. "You're not the first witcher through here," the older one said. "There was another passed by 4 days past. Tall, dark-haired, eyes like cats. He left trouble behind." Geralt's pulse quickened. What kind of trouble? The guard scratched at his beard. "Alchemist's fire. Half the lower market burned. The man vanished before we could catch him." Geralt handed over a silver coin. "Where was the alchemist's shop?" The guard pocketed it with a grunt. "North Quarter. Look for the sign of a crystal flask. What's left of it anyway?" The street was still blackened from the fire. Charred beams jutted from ruined walls, and the air reeked faintly of ash and old smoke. Geralt knelt beside a broken crate, brushing soot away until he found the faint glimmer of alchemical residue. Copper salts, rabies, and something else. A trace of phthalate, the same rare toxin used to kill witchers. He straightened and looked toward the one building still standing, a shop front with cracked shutters and a half-collapsed sign that read, "Erlin's Elixirs." The door creaked open before he reached it. An old man peered out, thin, with spectacles perched on a long nose and ink stains on his fingers. "No more buyers," I said, he snapped. Then he froze. "Oh, you're not one of them." Geralt tilted his head. "Not one of who?" "The madmen with your eyes," the alchemist whispered. "They came here the night of the fire, bought ingredients in bulk, Mutagenic agents, binding salts, hydrogenum. I refused them. They forced me to help. His voice broke. One of them threw a vial. The fire took everything. 2 of them? Geralt asked sharply. Yes. The dark-haired one gave the orders. The other, smaller, quieter. His skin was gray, like old parchment. He never spoke, only watched. There was something wrong with him. He smelled of death. Geralt's brow furrowed. You saw where they went? They took the northern road, toward the pass. Spoke of the White Valley. Said their work was nearly finished. Geralt laid a coin on the counter. For the damages. The alchemist's hands trembled as he took it. You mean to follow them? Geralt turned to leave. That's what I do. He rode through the night, the moon glimmering pale above the forest. The road climbed higher into the mountains, winding between cliffs and dark ravines. Somewhere ahead lay the White Valley, an abandoned mining settlement, once rich in silver and saltpeter, now left to ruin. If Keldrin sought isolation for his work, he'd find it there. As Geralt neared the pass, the wind shifted. The air carried a scent, burnt iron and blood. He slowed Roach, dismounted, and crouched low. Tracks crossed the snow. Human boots, one set lighter, dragging slightly as though the walker limped. The trail led toward a ravine. He followed, every sense alert. The silence was thick, unnatural. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then he saw it, a campfire flickering weakly beside a cluster of rocks. Geralt approached, hand on hilt. The figure slumped beside the fire did not move. Another witcher lay there, armor scorched, skin blistered from fire, dead for perhaps a day. The medallion on his chest bore the head of a wolf. One of his own. Geralt's throat tightened. He turned the body gently, searching for signs. No ordinary wounds. Again the burn pattern from internal combustion. Phthalate mixed with ignis oil triggered from within. A killer who knew precisely how Witcher's blood reacted to alchemy. A rustle behind him. Geralt whirled, blade half drawn. A man stepped from the shadows, hooded, face hidden behind a scarf. His hands were empty, raised in peace. Easy, Witcher. I mean no harm. Then speak quickly, Geralt said. I followed them too, the stranger replied. The black-haired one and his pale companion. They passed through here 2 nights ago. I was hired to track them. By whom? A sorceress. Said the man was a renegade alchemist, dangerous. Paid me to find where he'd gone. I lost them at the gorge. But I saw something. Strange shapes moving with them. Men, or what used to be men. Geralt frowned. Described them. Tall, silent, skin cracked like stone. They moved only when ordered. Dead eyes, empty. Mutants. Keldrin's experiments were walking. What's your name? Geralt asked. Darren. A sellsword by trade. You're Geralt of Rivia, aren't you? The White Wolf. I've heard tales. Tales exaggerate. Maybe so. But whatever you're chasing, it's worse than the stories. Geralt sheathed his sword. If you value your life, turn back. This isn't your fight. Darren's eyes hardened. You think I came this far to run? They burned a village near Marnadal, killed everyone inside. I'll see them dead or die trying. Geralt regarded him for a long moment, then nodded. Keep close, do as I say, and you might live to tell someone. They broke camp before dawn, climbing toward the White Valley. Snow fell thick now, muffling the sound of their steps. The pass opened onto a basin surrounded by cliffs, an ancient mine complex carved into the rock. Columns of smoke rose from its depths, faintly green against the gray sky. Geralt crouched behind a boulder, surveying the scene. Figures moved among the ruins, 5, maybe 6. Some human, others grotesque parodies of men, their movements stiff, jerky. At the far end stood Keldrin himself, bent over a stone altar where blue light pulsed like a heartbeat. "That's him?" Darren whispered. Geralt nodded once. "Stay here." He moved like a shadow, silent over the snow. Closer now he could hear Keldrin's voice, low, chanting in elder speech. Words of transformation and binding. The glow from the altar flared brighter. Upon it lay the body of another witcher, motionless. Geralt's anger flared hot. He stepped into the open. "Enough, Keldrin." The chant stopped. Keldrin lifted his head, a cruel smile twisting his scarred face. "White Wolf," he said softly. "Right on time." Geralt drew steel. "This ends now." Keldrin gestured, and 2 of the mutants turned, lurching forward. Their skin gleamed with veins of molten silver, their eyes empty hollows. "Then come," Keldrin said. "Let's see if the old world can survive the birth of the new." Geralt raised his sword, snow swirling around him as the first creature charged, shrieking, a nightmare forged from the flesh of a witcher. And the valley erupted into battle. Steel sang through the frozen air. Geralt met the first creature head-on, parrying its clawed strike and driving his sword deep into its chest. The blade sank halfway. Before jarring against bone harder than iron, the mutant shrieked and swung wildly, a blur of muscle and madness. Sparks flew as their blades clashed again and again. Geralt ducked low, cut across its knee, then thrust upward beneath its ribs. The creature staggered, gurgling black blood that steamed on the snow. It fell heavily, twitching once before stilling. The second came before the first had stopped moving, taller, faster, a grotesque parody of a witcher's grace. Its eyes burned with pale light, its movements eerily precise, every motion calculated to kill. Geralt countered, blocking 2 blows, then another. The strength behind each strike was monstrous, inhuman. He stepped back, muttered "Ard." The shockwave hurled the creature into the rocks, buying him a breath's time. He rolled his shoulder, ignoring the pain, and reached for a flask at his belt. The taste of Thunderbolt burned bitter on his tongue. Strength surged through his limbs, and the world slowed. The mutant came again, blades flashing. Geralt sidestepped, pivoted, and cut clean through its neck. The head tumbled into the snow, steam rising where black ichor hissed against the frost. He turned toward Keldrin, but the man was already moving, retreating toward the altar where blue fire still pulsed. Geralt advanced, sword raised. "You'll kill them all," Keldrin called, his voice echoing through the ravine. "Every last witcher who remains. You'll do it because you must, because you were made for nothing else." "Stop talking," Geralt growled. "You sound like a mad bard." "Mad?" Keldrin laughed, a harsh, joyless sound. "Madness is clarity in a world that calls monsters saviors." He threw a vial. It shattered at Geralt's feet, releasing a burst of crimson smoke that stung the eyes and throat. Geralt leapt back, cursing, and when the haze cleared, Keldrin was gone. Footsteps behind. Darren appeared, bow in hand. An arrow knocked. His face was pale. "By the gods, what are those things?" "Witchers," Geralt said grimly, wiping blood from his sword. "Or what's left of them." They scoured the camp. The altar still glowed faintly, pulsing with life like the heartbeat of a dying beast. Geralt approached it warily. On its surface lay a corpse, another witcher perhaps from the Griffin School, pale and still. Tubes of glass and silver fed into his body, drawing out dark fluid that ran into crystal flasks nearby. Darren swallowed hard. "He's dead?" "No," Geralt said softly. "He's empty." He severed the tubes with a swift stroke. The corpse did not stir. The blue light guttered, faded, and finally died. Geralt studied the flasks, careful not to touch them. Inside, black liquid shimmered faintly. "Mutagenic essence," he murmured. "Witcher blood, refined for alchemy. Keldron's building something larger, something that feeds on us." "Can't we destroy it?" Geralt nodded toward the fire. "Help me." They gathered the flasks, shattered the runes, and piled what remained atop the altar. Geralt struck flint, and the flames leapt high. The mixture burned with a light too bright for mortal fire, green and white, the color of corrupted magic. "May it end with this," Darren said quietly. Geralt shook his head. "It never ends. He'll move on. He's too careful. Then we track him." Geralt looked at the man. His jaw was set, his eyes grim, but beneath the bravado, Geralt saw fear. "You're no witcher? You're not trained for what's coming?" Darren's mouth twitched. "You think I've got anything left to lose?" Geralt said nothing. The fire crackled, casting long shadows against the cliff walls. Somewhere above, an owl hooted, a lonely sound in the silence. They rested briefly before dawn, sheltered beneath a rocky overhang. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains quiet and silvered with frost. Geralt sat sharpening his blade, each slow stroke of the whetstone measured, thoughtful. Darren watched from the other side of the fire. "You fought things like that before?" he asked finally. "Not like that," Geralt said. "Witchers were meant to fight monsters, not become them." The sellsword frowned. "You sound like you pity them." "I do," Geralt admitted. "They didn't choose what they became. None of us did." He looked into the flames, seeing faces long gone, witchers of Kaer Morhen, men who had once laughed, trained, fought beside him, most dead now, some slain by monsters, others by time and men's hatred. Darren's voice broke the silence. "If Keldron's making more of those things, what happens when he succeeds?" Geralt's answer was low, heavy with certainty. "Then the world won't need monsters anymore. It'll have us." By mid-morning they reached the lower valley. The tracks from the camp led toward the north, a narrow trail descending into the forested foothills. Signs of passage marked the way. Trampled grass, broken branches, the faint scent of alchemical smoke. Geralt dismounted to examine the prints. "Two sets," he murmured. "Keldron and the gray-skinned one. The second's heavier, unstable gait, dragging the left foot." Darren crouched beside him. "That one, his assistant? Or his creation?" Geralt said. "Maybe both." They followed the tracks into the forest. The air grew warmer as the sun climbed, the snow thinning to damp earth. Crows circled overhead, croaking harshly. A sense of wrongness hung in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Geralt's medallion quivered faintly, reacting not to magic but to the residue of twisted alchemy. After several hours, they came upon a clearing. At its center stood an old shrined Melitele, long abandoned. The stone idol was cracked, her face blackened by soot. Around her feet lay bones, dozens of them clean and white, arranged in a spiral pattern. Geralt knelt, studying the remains. "Human," he said softly. "Adults mostly, ritual killings." Darren's hand went to his sword. "You think they're his?" "Yes, he's gathering materials, testing his mutagens." A faint noise, a low moan, broke the silence. Both men turned. Near the edge of the clearing, half hidden in the grass, a figure stirred. Geralt was at its side in moments. It was a man, barely alive, his skin covered in lesions that glowed faintly blue. His eyes fluttered open, revealing golden irises, the unmistakable mark of a witcher. "Help me," he gasped. Geralt supported him gently. "Who did this?" "Care. Velen. He's gone there. The fire. He'll burn them all." Then the man convulsed, a strangled cry escaping his throat. His body twisted, bones cracking as his veins blackened. Geralt cursed, reaching for his sword. But it was too late. The man's flesh liquefied, collapsing into a pool of dark, bubbling mutagen. Darren recoiled. "Gods preserve us." Geralt wiped his blade clean. Keldrin's found the ruins again. He's returning to where it began. He mounted Roach and looked toward the horizon. Clouds gathered there, black and heavy, curling around the distant peaks where Caer Velen's towers stood like jagged teeth. Darren climbed into his saddle beside him. "Then we ride?" Geralt nodded. "We ride." And together they set off into the storm, the wind rising behind them, carrying with it the scent of smoke and alchemy, the promise of a reckoning yet to come. The storm chased them north for 2 days. Wind clawed through the valleys, driving snow in wild flurries that cut the face and chilled the bone. Geralt and Darren pressed on regardless, cloaks drawn tight, their mounts weary but obedient. Each mile brought them closer to Caer Velen, the ruined keep where Keldrin had begun his monstrous work, and where, if the dying witcher's words were true, he meant to end it. By the third evening the snow relented, leaving the world silent beneath a shroud of white. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and black against the sky. Smoke rose faintly from one of the distant peaks, twisting like a signal into the cold air. Darren reined in his horse beside a frozen brook. "That's him," he said grimly. "Has to be." Geralt nodded. "He's calling us. Wants to be found?" "You think it's a trap?" "It's always a trap," Geralt replied. They made camp beneath a stand of pines, the fire crackling low between them. Geralt sat, sharpening his blade again, though it needed no edge. The rhythm of the whetstone steadied his thoughts, gave him something to focus on besides the ache of the road and the growing unease that knotted in his chest. Darren watched him from across the fire. "You ever think," the sellsword began, "that you might not come back from this one?" Geralt didn't look up. "Every time." "What keeps you going, then?" The Witcher was silent for a long moment. "Habit, duty, take your pick." "Not vengeance?" Geralt met his eyes. "Vengeance is just another habit. Easier to feed than to stop." The wind sighed through the trees. Beyond the flicker of their fire, the forest stretched endless and dark. They reached the foothills by midday, where the path wound upward between cliffs slick with ice. The ruins of Caer Velen soon came into view, a massive broken keep clinging to the mountainside like a wounded beast. Its towers had collapsed long ago, but the main hall still stood, half buried in snow. Smoke curled from its chimneys, faint and gray. Geralt dismounted and led Roach the rest of the way on foot. "Stay behind me," he told Darren. "And whatever happens, don't touch anything you don't understand." Darren gave a dry laugh. "That doesn't leave much." The gates were gone, replaced by crude barricades of timber and stone. Symbols, Witcher runes, twisted and corrupted, had been carved into the walls. The air hummed faintly with power, enough to set Geralt's medallion trembling. Inside the courtyard lay the remnants of old training grounds, broken dummies, shattered swords, the bleached bones of long-dead men. At the center, a pyre burned fitfully, casting long shadows. Around it stood half a dozen figures. Mutants. Their bodies bore the marks of alchemy, skin mottled with burns, eyes lifeless, movements jerky as if controlled by invisible strings. They turned as one towards the newcomers. Geralt drew silver. "Keep to cover," he said, and charged. The creatures moved with terrifying speed. One lunged from the side, claws sweeping in a blur. Geralt met the strike, steel hissing as it sliced through flesh and tendon. Another came from behind, but Darren's arrow took it in the throat. The sellsword drew his blade and joined the fray, moving with surprising precision. For several heartbeats, the world dissolved into motion and sound. The ring of steel, the crunch of snow underfoot, the hiss of mutagens burning in the cold air. When it ended, 5 corpses lay sprawled in the snow, their blood black and smoking. Geralt wiped his sword clean. "You all right?" Darren nodded, panting. "They were witchers once?" "Yes," Geralt said quietly, before he broke them. From within the keep came the echo of footsteps, slow, measured, then a voice calm and familiar. "Still fightin' the inevitable, I see." Keldrin appeared in the archway, clad in tattered armor and a cloak of gray fur. His eyes glowed faintly beneath the shadow of his hood. In his hands, he held no sword, only a staff crowned with a shard of crystal pulsing with pale light. "You should have stayed in your mountains, Wolf," he said. "The world doesn't need you anymore." Geralt's voice was low. "You're done hiding behind corpses." "Hiding?" Keldrin stepped forward, his smile thin and sharp. "I've been building what the Witchers never could. Perfection. A breed without weakness. Free from hunger, from fear, from the coin of kings. You're building monsters." "Monsters?" Keldrin's laugh was bitter. "Look around you, Geralt. What are you? A killer of beasts for hire. A relic of a dying age. You think your code makes you better? The world forgets you already." Geralt's grip tightened. "You've killed your own kind." "They weren't my kind," Keldrin snarled. "They were tools, broken and cast aside. I gave them purpose. You gave them torment." For a heartbeat, the 2 men faced each other in silence, snow drifting between them like ash. Then Keldrin raised his staff. The crystal flared, and the ground beneath Geralt's feet trembled. From the shadows of the courtyard rose shapes, men, women, children, all spectral, faces twisted with pain. The spirits of the dead. Darren stumbled back, crossing himself. "What sorcery is this?" Geralt's medallion vibrated violently. He muttered a curse and drew a sign. A wave of Yrden spread out around him, holding the spirits at bay. Keldrin watched, eyes burning with cold fire. "You can't stop me. Every Witcher slain feeds my work. Every drop of their cursed blood brings us closer to the next evolution." "Evolution," Geralt said. "You mean extinction?" With a roar, he broke the sign circle and lunged. Their blades met in a clash that split the night. Steel against steel, fire against frost. Sparks burst in showers as they fought across the snow, the staff's crystal flaring with each strike. Keldrin fought with inhuman strength, his speed fueled by mutagens. Geralt countered with signs, the air alive with Igni and Ard. The blast of fire seared the staff, but Keldrin only laughed, the sound raw and terrible. "You can't kill me, Wolf. I am what they made us to be." Geralt drove forward, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest. They crashed through a fallen gate into the main hall. The air inside was thick with smoke and the metallic stench of alchemy. Dozens of glass vats lined the walls, each containing half-formed figures floating in murky fluid, mutants waiting to be born. Darren followed, sword drawn, but froze at the sight. Gods above. Keldrin struck again, staff crackling with blue lightning. The bolt missed Geralt by inches, shattering a vat. Liquid spilled across the floor, hissing like acid. Geralt feinted left, then drove his sword through Keldrin's side. The man gasped, staggered, and dropped to one knee, but he was smiling. "You think it's over?" he rasped. "You've only cut the root. The seed's already planted." With his last strength, Keldrin slammed the staff into the ground. The crystal exploded, sending a shockwave through the hall. The vats shattered one by one, spilling their contents in steaming torrents. The air filled with the stench of blood and burning glass. Geralt seized Darren and dragged him clear. As the ceiling groaned, stones began to fall. They burst into the courtyard just as the hall behind them collapsed in flame and smoke. The explosion rolled through the valley like thunder. Geralt turned, chest heaving. Nothing remained of the keep but ruin and fire. Darren stared at the destruction, face pale. "Is he dead?" Geralt's eyes lingered on the flames. Maybe. Maybe not. Above them, the smoke rose into the gray sky, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. The wind howled through the mountains, and for a moment, Geralt thought he heard laughter, low, cold, and distant. He sheathed his sword, weary to the bone. "Come on," he said, "it's over." But even as they rode away from the burning ruins, the Witcher knew that it wasn't. Something of Keldrin's madness would endure, carried by the blood and ashes now seeping into the frozen earth. And deep within him, beneath the calm and the silence, Geralt felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The road down from Caervellen was steep and treacherous, winding through the ravine where melted snow ran black with ash. Geralt and Darren rode in silence, the only sound the creak of saddle leather and the distant echo of collapsing stone. Behind them the keep still smoldered, a wound upon the mountainside, its smoke twisting skyward like a dark banner. By the time they reached the valley floor, night had fallen. The moon hung pale above the peaks, casting silver light over the snowfields. They found shelter in the ruins of a watchtower long abandoned, its roof half gone, but the hearth still standing. Geralt gathered what dry wood he could, kindled a small flame, and set about cleaning his swords. Darren sat opposite him, his face drawn, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "I keep seeing them," he said at last. "Those things in the vats? They looked alive." "They were," Geralt said quietly. "For a time. Can't shake it. The thought that someone, something, made them from men like you." Geralt glanced at him, the firelight catching the cat-like gleam of his eyes. "That's what the Witchers were made from, too, once. Men turned by alchemy and pain into something other. Difference is you still think, still choose." "Do we?" Geralt murmured. "That's the question Keldrin asked." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the sighing of the wind through the tower's cracks. After a while, Darren spoke again. "You think he's dead?" Geralt's hand paused on the whetstone. "I've seen too much to believe in simple endings. Men like Keldrin don't die easily. If his mutagens took hold, he may be less man than ever now." Darren exhaled slowly. "Then we'd better hope the mountain buried him deep." At dawn, they left the tower and rode east toward the lowlands. The sky was bruised and heavy with clouds. Villages appeared now and then, pale smoke rising from their chimneys. Word of Caervelon's destruction had not yet reached them. The people still worked their fields, unaware of the fire that had nearly birthed a new plague into the world. By midday, they came upon a crossroads where a group of travelers huddled beside a broken cart. One of them, a woman with wind-reddened cheeks, waved them down. "Ho there, Witcher," she called. Geralt slowed roach. "What's the trouble?" "Bandits," the woman said. "Took the oxen, beat my husband. Said they'd be back by nightfall." Geralt dismounted, glancing at the blood on the man's temple, the shattered axle of the cart. "How many?" "5, maybe 6. Darren frowned. "We could deal with them. Might even find a bed for the night if we help." Geralt studied the woman's frightened eyes and nodded. "Show me where." They followed her through the forest to a clearing where a crooked farmhouse stood among frost-bitten fields. The ground was scarred with hoof prints and wagon ruts. Geralt crouched, studying the tracks. "They'll return before dark," he said. "They didn't take everything. Means they plan to claim it later." Darren strung his bow. "Then we'll be waiting." The Witcher's lips curved faintly. "You learn quickly?" Dusk settled, painting the world in shades of blue and ash. The bandits came as predicted, riders cloaked in furs, blades glinting in the dim light. There were 6 of them, swaggering and loud, laughing as they neared the farmhouse. Geralt stepped from the shadows. "Evening." The leader, a broad man with a scar down his cheek, reined in his horse, scowling. "And who in the piss are you?" "Someone who dislikes thieves," Geralt replied. The man barked a laugh. "Then you'll hate what comes next." He raised his hand to signal his men, but before he could speak again, Darren's arrow hissed through the air and struck his shoulder. The bandit howled, wheeling his horse, and chaos erupted. Geralt moved through them like wind through wheat, silent, sure, merciless. His sword flashed in the firelight, each strike precise and final. 2 fell before they understood what hunted them. Another tried to flee, only to be dragged from his saddle by Darren's blade. When it ended, the clearing was silent, save for the rasp of Darren's breath. Geralt wiped his sword clean on the leader's cloak and sheathed it. "You fight well," he said. Darren gave a grim smile. "Had a good teacher." They left the bodies where they fell. The farmer's wife thanked them with trembling hands, pressing bread and cheese into their packs. "You've saved us," she whispered. "How can we repay you?" Geralt shook his head. "Keep to your road, and don't stop for strangers." They rode again by moonlight, following the northern trail, but the peace of their small victory was short-lived. It began with a sound, a faint hum that grew stronger as they rode. Geralt's medallion vibrated against his chest. The air felt heavy, thick with unseen power. "Something's wrong," he said. Ahead, the trees thinned into a glade. At its center stood a shallow pond, perfectly still. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting not the moon above, but a swirl of pale light that seemed to pulse from within. Geralt dismounted. "Stay here." He approached the pond slowly, every instinct sharp. The smell of alchemy hung faintly in the air. He knelt at the edge, dipping his fingers into the water. It was warm, unnaturally so, and beneath its surface lay fragments of glass and twisted metal. Keldrin's work. Again, the realization hit like a blow. This wasn't over. He had scattered his experiments across the land, pools of mutagenic runoff seeping into soil and water, spreading corruption beyond the mountains. Darren joined him, eyes wide. "Is it dangerous?" More than you know, Geralt said. This pond will taint everything it touches. Animals, plants, people. The mutagens will breed in them, change them. He drew a vial from his belt and poured its contents into the water. The surface hissed, boiling briefly before turning dark. Neutralizing agent, he said. It won't last long. Darren looked grim. If there are more like this, there will be, Geralt interrupted. He planned for failure. If he died, his work would live on. It's not just one monster we hunt now. It's a plague. For a moment, neither spoke. The forest was silent, the moon veiled by clouds. Finally, Darren broke the silence. Then what do we do? Geralt mounted Roach. We ride. We find the others, and we end it before it spreads. The sellsword nodded, jaw tight. Where do we start? Geralt looked north, where the land rolled into darkness. Novigrad, he said. If Keldrin had allies, they'll be there. Every secret finds its way to that city. As they set off, the night deepened around them. Somewhere behind the poisoned pond bubbled softly, the neutralizing potion already losing strength. Beneath its surface, something stirred. A ripple, faint but unmistakable. Geralt did not look back. He knew what it meant. Evil rarely died clean, and as the wind rose, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the mountains, the Witcher's thoughts were grim. The hunt was no longer for one man, but for the legacy he had unleashed. The wind sharpened as they rode toward Novigrad, scouring the plains with winter's breath. The sun lingered low and pale on the horizon, bleeding light through clouds the color of ash. Geralt and Darren rode in silence, cloaks snapping in the cold air, each man lost in thought. The trail wound through lonely farmlands and forests thinned by frost. Twice they passed hamlets where the air smelled wrong, too thick, too sweet. At one such place they found the cause. A withered cow lying near a well, its flesh puckered and gray as if drained of life. The villagers had fled, leaving doors unbarred, fires cold. Geralt crouched beside the carcass, pressing a gloved hand to its hide. It was warm, though the morning bit with frost. He lifted his hand. Beneath his fingers, the flesh quivered slightly, as though still alive. Mutagenic residue, he muttered. Darren swore softly. More of Keldrin's poison? Aye. It's spreading faster than I thought. He rose, gaze sweeping the horizon. The land was wide and still, the silence too deep, too clean. Not a bird stirred in the bare trees. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. We'll need to warn the city, Darren said. Geralt's tone was flat. Novigrad doesn't listen to warnings. It listens to gold. By nightfall, the towers of Novigrad rose ahead, a sprawl of red roofs and smoke, lanterns burning like scattered stars along the harbor. Ships moved in the dark waters beyond the walls, their sails ghostly white against the sea's black sheen. They crossed the bridge under the watch of the city guard, who eyed Geralt's swords with familiar suspicion. One of them sneered, "No monsters here, Witcher, unless you count the priests." Geralt's mouth twitched. "I've killed worse." They entered the city's labyrinth of alleys and markets, where the air reeked of fish, tar, and burning tallow. Novigrad was never silent, not even in winter. Traders shouted from stalls, beggars whispered in the gutters, and somewhere a bard's lute sang a tune no one listened to. Their first stop was the Golden Sturgeon, a tavern thick with smoke and rumor. Geralt pushed through the crowd to the bar, tossing a few coins on the counter. "Information," he said quietly. The barkeep, a broad man with eyes like wet stones, looked him over. "Depends on what kind. Alchemy, experiments, Strange buyers asking for rare reagents, mutagens, acids, things the eternal fire frowns upon. The man grunted, lowering his voice. You're not the first asking after that. A week passed, a merchant came through selling bottles of black tonic. Said it was medicine. Folk drank it. Half of them died screaming. Geralt's eyes hardened. Where did the merchant go? Warehouse district by the canal. Name of Yorveth's wharf. Belongs to a guild that doesn't exist. Geralt tossed another coin. You've earned a quiet night. As they left, Darren adjusted his cloak. This guild, smugglers? Worse, Geralt said. Alchemists without conscience. They'll have taken Keldrin's work and found a way to sell it. The wharf district lay silent under the moon, the air heavy with salt and rot. The warehouses stood like giants asleep, windows shuttered, doors locked. Geralt crouched beside one, examining the snow where faint tracks led toward a side entrance, bare feet, too long in the toe, nails scraping the stone. Mutants, he said softly. Fresh ones? They slipped inside. The darkness reeked of oil and mold. Crates lined the walls, stamped with false trademarks. Geralt cracked one open. Inside were rows of vials filled with the same black liquid he'd seen in Keldrin's lab. Darren lifted one, the glass trembling in his hand. What happens if someone drinks this? They don't die cleanly. From deeper in the warehouse came a sound, a soft, wet shuffle like flesh dragging across wood. Geralt drew steel and gestured for silence. The shadows moved. A figure emerged, hunched and trembling. It had once been human. Its skin gleamed with a faint silver sheen, eyes milky and blind. It hissed, and 3 more shapes moved behind it. Geralt struck first. His sword cut through the dark in an arc of light. The nearest creature fell, black ichor splattering the floor. Another lunged at Darren, who met it with his blade, driving steel into its chest. The thing shrieked, clawing at him before collapsing. Geralt turned, parrying the last, and drove his sword through its throat. The room fell silent again, save for their breathing. Darren wiped his blade on a rag. They were just dumped here? Or delivered, Geralt said grimly. Someone's buying them, using them. He searched the far corner and found a desk littered with ledgers, parchments, and broken quills. Among them lay a letter sealed in red wax. He broke it open and read aloud. To Master Keldrin, our preparations continue. The buyers from Oxenfurt have confirmed their interest. The mutagens show promise when diluted. The fire's priests will pay handsomely for a cure to the curse they themselves unleashed. Geralt's expression darkened. So the eternal fire's involved. The priests? Darren asked. Why would they control? Geralt cut in. They fear what they can't burn. If they can make the world dependent on their cure, they'll rule more than souls. He pocketed the letter and turned toward the door. We burn this place. They worked swiftly, dousing the crates with lamp oil and setting them alight. The fire spread fast, devouring wood and paper alike. Smoke poured through the roof as they stepped into the cold night, the flames behind them painting the sky orange. By dawn, the city was whispering. Fire in the docks. A warehouse burned to ash. No one saw who lit it and no bodies were found. Geralt and Darren lay low in a tanner's loft overlooking the canals. Below them the streets teemed with guards and gossip. They'll be hunting whoever did that, Darren said. Let them hunt, Geralt replied. We've cut one head from a hydra. More will grow. He unrolled the letter again, tracing the ink with a finger. Oxenfurt. That's where the next shipment was bound. Darren frowned. That's a university city? Full of scholars? Scholars, Geralt said, who believe knowledge excuses everything. He packed his gear, checked his swords, and looked out toward the sunrise. The first light touched the rooftops of Novigrad, turning smoke to gold. It was almost beautiful, if not for the faint smell of burning mutagen still clinging to the air. Darren joined him, adjusting his cloak. "If we keep this up," he said, "we'll have the whole north after us." Geralt's voice was calm. "Let them come." As they slipped away into the waking city, Novigrad stirred around them, a beast of commerce and faith, blind to the corruption spreading beneath its skin. And somewhere within that sprawl, Geralt knew, more of Keldrin's poison waited, festering in minds greedy for power and hands too eager to play at gods. The Witcher tightened his cloak and turned east. "Oxenfurt," he said. "That's where we cut the next route." Darren nodded grimly, and together they vanished into the fog, rising off the river, the echoes of hooves fading behind them. The hunt, it seemed, had only changed its shape. The river to Oxenfurt lay gray and sluggish beneath the winter sky. Geralt and Darren rode along its banks in silence, cloaks drawn against the cold. The horizon swallowed in fog. Ice cracked softly under Roach's hooves, and the faint scent of coal smoke drifted from distant chimneys. They rode hard through the following days, resting only when the horses began to stumble from exhaustion. The road wound past forests rimed with frost and villages shuttered tight against the season. Once, near a bridge, they passed a corpse swinging from a tree, a thief perhaps, or a deserter. Ravens scattered as they rode by, leaving only the creak of rope and the whisper of the wind. By the third night, the spires of Oxenfurt appeared across the river, a city of scholars and smoke, its walls bathed in the glow of hundreds of lanterns. Bells tolled faintly from the university towers. Geralt and Darren crossed the stone bridge and entered the city at dawn, when the streets were still empty and the air smelled of parchment and cold rain. Geralt dismounted near the market square and handed Roach's reins to a sleepy stable hand. "Keep her fed," he said, "and if anyone touches the swords, you lose a hand." The boy paled. Yes, Master Witcher." They moved through the waking streets, past bookshops and apothecaries whose signs creaked in the wind. Students hurried by clutching scrolls and steaming mugs, paying little heed to the two travelers cloaked in dust and blood. Their destination lay near the university's edge, the Copper Griffin, a tavern frequented by alchemists and philosophers, men who debated the morality of creating life while drinking themselves senseless. Inside, the air was thick with pipe smoke and the smell of ale. Geralt took a table near the hearth. "We'll start with talk," he said. "Always easier to find answers before you have to start cutting throats." A serving girl approached, eyes widening at the sight of his medallion. "What'll it be? All? Bread? Someone who trades in alchemical supplies?" Geralt said. She hesitated. "You'll find Master Theodric at the university's North Tower. He buys strange things, mutagenic compounds, beast blood, that sort." Geralt nodded. "That'll do." The university's North Tower loomed above the river, its windows glowing faintly green with lamplight. Inside, the smell of incense and chemicals filled the air. Shelves sagged under the weight of books and bottles. Behind a cluttered desk stood a man in scholar's robes, tall and pale, with hair like straw and eyes the color of rust. "Master Theodric?" Geralt asked. The man turned, squinting. "Ah, a witcher. How novel. Do come in, though mind your boots. Some of my samples are volatile." Geralt stepped carefully over a tangle of glass tubing. I'm told you've been buying rare ingredients. Black mutagens in particular. Theodric's brow furrowed. So word travels fast. I assumed my transactions were private. They are, Geralt said evenly, until people start dying. The scholar sighed. You misunderstand. My purchases were for study, not for profit. A merchant sold them to me, claimed they were distilled from monster blood. I've been analyzing them for weeks. Merchant's name? Dethan. Came through from Novigrad with papers, permits, everything in order. He mentioned his patron once, someone called the Alchemical Circle. Geralt's eyes narrowed. Where can I find this Dethan? He rented rooms above the Tanner's Guild, though I doubt he's still there. He was ill, skin gray, hands shaking. Said the fumes from his work had poisoned him. Geralt nodded curtly and turned to go. Theodric called after him. If you find more of that substance, bring it here. It's unlike anything I've seen. Alive, almost. Geralt's voice was low. That's what makes it dangerous. The Tanner's Guild stood near the riverfront, a maze of workshops that stank of oil and rotting hides. The room Dethan had rented was easy enough to find. Its door hung half open, the smell of death seeping into the corridor. Geralt entered hand on sword. The room was a ruin, papers scattered, bottles shattered, blood staining the floorboards. In the corner lay what remained of Dethan. His flesh was gray and cracked, veins dark as ink, eyes open and blind. Geralt crouched beside the corpse. The man's chest had burst outward, ribs splayed like petals of a grotesque flower. Something had forced its way free. Gods preserve us, Darren muttered, covering his nose. What of that? Geralt didn't answer. On the wall above the corpse, written in blood, were words, in elder speech. The seed grows. He stood slowly. We're too late. The mutagen's no longer in vials, it's alive. As if to answer, a sound stirred beneath the floorboards. A wet, crawling noise, faint but unmistakable. Geralt drew steel, the boards cracked, and something erupted from below, a creature half-formed, glistening with slime, its limbs too long, its face a mask of smooth flesh with no eyes, no mouth. It moved with jerking speed, a parody of human motion. Geralt swung. The blade bit deep, splitting the thing in two. It shrieked, not with voice but with vibration, a pulse that rattled the windows. The halves convulsed, twisting, and before Geralt's eyes began to knit back together. Out! He barked. They fled into the street as the building behind them shuddered. Flames burst from the windows, green and blue. The roof collapsed in a roar of alchemical fire. They didn't stop until they reached the riverbank. The water reflected the blaze, painting their faces gold and red. Darren caught his breath. Tell me it's dead. Geralt's tone was grim. For now. But that wasn't Keldrin's doing. Someone else continued his work. You mean the Circle? Geralt nodded. A guild of alchemists. If they've learned to breed the mutagen, the North's already doomed. They spent the next day gathering whispers. In taverns and back alleys, they heard the same rumor repeated. Strange lights in the marshes beyond the city. Livestock vanishing. The water itself turning black. The locals avoided the swamps, calling them cursed. At dusk, Geralt and Darren stood at the city's gate. The guards watched them go with relief. Few dared enter the marshes at night. The air grew thick and sour as they rode. Mist clung to the ground, and every step of the horses stirred black water from the reeds. Fireflies drifted like embers in the dark, though their glow was sickly green. Geralt dismounted near a low rise where the ruins of an old chapel stood. The stones were covered in moss, the roof half collapsed. He ran a gloved hand along the walls. There's magic here, old, and something newer, fouler layered atop it. Darren's hand rested on his hilt. You think this is where they're hiding? Geralt's medallion trembled in answer. They're not hiding. They're waiting. A figure stepped from the shadows within the ruin. A woman, tall and slender, her robes black as pitch, her eyes glowing faintly with alchemical fire. In her hands, she held a vial that pulsed like a living heart. Geralt of Rivia, she said, her voice smooth as oil. We've been expecting you. He drew his sword slowly. Then you know why I'm here. Of course, you wish to stop what's already begun, but it's too late. The Circle's vision will outlive us all. Darren's voice was hard. You're spreading death. She smiled faintly. No, we're spreading perfection, the Witcher's gift given to the world. Geralt's eyes narrowed. That gift's a curse. The woman uncorked the vial. The air shimmered, and the scent of rot filled the night. Only for those too weak to embrace it. The liquid inside began to glow brighter, its pulse matching the rhythm of a heartbeat. The ground beneath them trembled. From the marsh rose shapes, dozens of them pale and glistening, their forms half human, half nightmare. Geralt raised his sword. Darren, back to the wall. Don't let them surround us. The woman laughed softly, the sound echoing through the ruin. You can't kill evolution, Witcher. Geralt's answer was the hiss of steel leaving scabbard. Let's see. And as the first creature lunged from the mist, he met it with fire and fury, the night erupting into battle once more. Steel flared in the mist, scattering droplets of cold rain that shimmered like falling embers. Geralt met the first creature's charge head on, his blade slicing through sinew and rot. The thing fell, convulsing, yet its halves twitched and writhed upon the mud. Another came from the side, talons flashing, but Geralt spun, striking low to sever its legs before driving his sword clean through its chest. The marsh stank of blood and mutagenic corruption, a reek thick enough to choke the breath. Darren fought at his flank, bow discarded for the short sword he carried at his belt. He was not trained as a witcher, but he moved with desperate courage, hacking at the abominations that closed around them. Still, for everyone that fell, two more rose from the black water. Back, Geralt barked, toward the chapel. They retreated step by step through the slough, boots sucking in the mire. The ruin's broken walls loomed behind them, its roof caved in like the skull of some ancient beast. The robed woman stood in the archway, still holding her vial aloft, chanting in a language older than men. The liquid within pulsed brighter now, throwing green firelight across the stones. Geralt's medallion thrummed against his chest. He knew the power of the ritual she invoked. It was transformation, not summoning. The mutagenic brew wasn't meant to create more beasts. It was meant to spread, to seed the land itself. Darren, he shouted, the vial! The sellsword saw it too. He shouldered past two of the creatures, taking a slashing wound to his arm, but not slowing. Geralt cut down another that lunged at Darren's back, then hurled a sign, Ard, that blasted the woman off her feet. She hit the stones hard, the vial tumbling from her grasp. Geralt was on it in an instant. His boot came down, shattering the glass. The contents hissed and steamed, eating into the ground like acid. He drew a second vial from his own belt, a neutralizer of his own making, and poured it over the spill. The two substances met with a shriek like burning metal, then fell silent. The woman's voice rose from the floor behind him, ragged with fury. Fool, You think you've stopped it? That was but a spark. The circle lives." She raised her hand, and Geralt saw her veins glow green beneath the skin. The mutagen coursed within her, her body twisted, bones cracking audibly, face elongating into something half-human, half-scaled. Geralt cursed under his breath. He had seen many transformations, but few as deliberate as this one. She welcomed the change. "Then I'll kill your circle one by one," he said. He advanced. The creature that had once been a woman screeched, a sound that made the stones tremble. She leapt, claws flashing faster than any mortal thing. Geralt met her midair, his sword catching her throat. Her momentum carried her past him, the blade slicing clean through. She hit the ground in 2 pieces. The remaining monsters faltered. Without their master's call, they began to unravel, flesh sloughing from bone, black fluids spilling into the marsh. The stench was unbearable. When silence finally fell, only the hiss of cooling alchemy remained. They searched the ruin after, stepping carefully among the broken glass and scorched symbols. Geralt found papers sealed in wax, half burned by spilled mutagen. He spread them out upon a stone altar, eyes narrowing as he read. Each page was written in the same precise hand, diagrams of anatomy, lists of reagents, and lines of formulae in elder speech. One line stood out among the rest, repeated 3 times in different places. "The blood of the wolf binds all." Geralt's expression hardened. "What does it mean?" Darren asked quietly, wiping mud from his blade. "They've been trying to use Witcher blood as a stabilizer," Geralt said. "The mutations burn most human bodies from within. Witcher essence keeps them alive, barely. They're hunting us to make themselves gods." Darren stared at him. "And you destroyed their sample?" "Not all of it. Keldrin's work survives somewhere. These were only his disciples." Darren swore softly. "How do you fight something like that?" Geralt's answer was cold and simple. "The same way you fight any disease. You burn it out." They buried what remained of the woman at the marsh's edge, not from pity, but to keep scavengers from spreading her corruption. The earth steamed where they dug, the soil blackened and sour. When the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, they mounted again. Mist drifted low across the marsh, whispering through reeds and dead trees. As they rode, Darren spoke. "If they're after Witcher blood, others may already be dead." Geralt nodded grimly. "Kaer Morhen, Kaer Treya, any place where our kind once trained, they'll scour them all. The blood's rare now, more valuable than gold." He thought of the keep's ruins, of Vesemir's grave, of the few remaining Witchers scattered across the continent. The idea of them being hunted not for their swords, but for what flowed in their veins, made his stomach twist. They rode north through the day, crossing into Redania once more. The countryside was quiet, but too quiet. Villages empty, fields untended, the roads littered with abandoned carts. More than once they saw signs of sickness, animals swollen and pale, water blackened at the edges, trees stripped of bark as though burned from within. Keldrin's curse was spreading faster than any plague. At dusk, they reached a roadside inn half buried in snow. The sign read, "The Copper Heart," though most of its letters had rotted away. Inside, the hearth burned low, and the few travelers sitting there glanced up nervously at the sight of Geralt's medallion. He ignored their stares, dropping a few coins on the counter for ale and stew. Darren joined him at a corner table. "We can't be everywhere," he said quietly. "You can't hunt all of them." "No," Geralt admitted. "But I can find the source. The circle didn't work alone. There's a patron behind them, someone powerful enough to fund alchemy on this scale. Who? Geralt sipped his ale. Only one place could birth such arrogance and call it science, the University of Ban Ard. Darren frowned. Another nest of scholars. Worse, mages. The word hung heavy in the air. Even the fire seemed to shrink from it. They rode again at dawn. The road to Ban Ard climbed through forested hills, the trees skeletal against a sky of iron gray. Snow fell, soft but relentless. Geralt rode in silence, his mind turning over the fragments of what he had read in the marsh. The blood of the wolf binds all. He understood now what Keldrin had sought. Not revenge, not perfection, but immortality through replication, to make more witchers without the need for trials, without the cost. 1,000 Keldrins, 1,000 blades, loyal to none. When night came, they camped by a frozen stream. Geralt stared into the fire, lost in thought. Darren watched him. You're thinking of him again, Keldrin? Geralt nodded slowly. He started this to destroy what made him suffer, but in the end, he became worse than the men who made him. He reached into his pouch and drew forth one of the burned papers from the ruin. The ink had run, but a single phrase remained legible at the bottom. The hunt will cleanse the old world. Geralt stared at it for a long time, then fed it to the fire. The flames devoured it in silence. Above them, the night was vast and still. Somewhere beyond those clouds, the stars watched, indifferent to the struggles of men and monsters alike. When Geralt finally lay down to rest, the wind carried a sound from far to the east, a howl, faint but unmistakable. Not wolf, not man, but something between. He opened his eyes to the darkness, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The hunt, he thought, had begun again. The next days brought bitter winds and gray skies. Snow swept down from the mountains, blinding at times, forcing Geralt and Darren to take shelter beneath pines or in the ruins of forgotten watchtowers. The road to Ban Ard wound through lands long abandoned by farmers, fields gone fallow, cottages empty but for crows. The silence of the world weighed heavy, as though the very earth held its breath. When at last the weather cleared, the road climbed steeply toward the north. Ban Ard's towers appeared through the mist, sharp spires of pale stone rising from the cliffs above the valley, their surfaces etched with runes that pulsed faintly in the cold light. To scholars, it was the heart of magical learning. To Geralt, it had always been a fortress of arrogance, a place where men played at being gods. They crossed the bridge over the chasm at dusk. The gates stood open, guarded by soldiers in silver and blue. Their captain, a stern man with a scarred jaw, looked Geralt over but said nothing when he saw the medallion at his throat. Even among mages, a witcher's reputation was enough to buy wary silence. Inside the city walls, the streets teemed with apprentices and alchemists. The air reeked of ozone and burnt herbs, the scent of spells half cast. Lanterns floated above doorways, their flames held aloft by invisible sigils. Geralt ignored the gawking faces and led Roach to a stable. Darren followed close behind, his eyes wide as he took in the splendor. Never seen so much gold and madness in one place, he muttered. Don't let it fool you, Geralt said. The richer the mage, the deeper the rot. They made their way to an inn near the lower academy district, a narrow building wedged between two towers. Its sign bore the shape of a quill and flask. The Philosopher's Rest. Inside, the patrons spoke in hushed tones. Students and scholars huddled over candles, Debating theories and rumors, Geralt approached the barkeep, a plump woman with ink-stained hands. "I'm looking for information," he said, "on the alchemical circle." The woman's eyes flicked toward the door before she answered. "You don't want to say that name too loudly, Witcher. Half the circle sits in Ban Ard now, teaching under new titles. They vanished after the purges, but their gold never did." Geralt laid a coin on the counter. "Where?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Tower of Vera. They call it a research collective now, but the same faces remain. A woman named Magistra Ithlain runs it. The circle's flame burns in her hands." The Tower of Vera stood apart from the others, its walls smooth as glass, windows glowing faintly green. Geralt waited until night fell before approaching. Snow muffled his steps as he climbed the narrow stair to the main door. It opened at his touch. No locks, only wards that yielded to his medallion's pulse. Inside, the air shimmered with power. The floor was a circle of polished obsidian engraved with runes that hummed faintly. Along the walls, vats of alchemical glass held liquids of every hue, bubbling softly in the candlelight. And in the center of the chamber stood a woman in silver robes, her hair the color of ash, her eyes bright and cold. "I wondered when the wolf would come," she said without turning. Geralt drew no weapon. "You know my name?" "All Witchers share it in whispers. Keldrin spoke of you often." The name hung in the air like a curse. Geralt's fingers twitched toward his sword. "Then you were part of his circle." "I was his teacher," she said. "He was brilliant, reckless, and blind, but his dream lives on in me." "Dream?" Geralt spat. "He made monsters from men." She turned at last, her gaze piercing. "So did your masters. The only difference is that he wanted to perfect the design." Geralt's jaw tightened. "Perfection doesn't come from slaughter." "No," she said softly. "It comes from sacrifice." She gestured, and the runes on the floor blazed to life. The light seared the air, and for an instant Geralt felt his strength waver. The runes were binding sigils, crafted to hold creatures of mutation, witchers among them. He gritted his teeth, forcing his will through the pain. "Yrden," he thought, tracing the sign with a twist of his fingers. His own circle flared at his feet, breaking the hold. The backlash shattered glass across the chamber, sending shards flying like hail. Ithlain laughed. "You're stronger than I expected." Geralt drew steel. "You're still underestimating me." The duel began without another word. Her first spell came fast, a lance of green fire that hissed through the air. Geralt rolled aside, cutting the energy with a sweep of silver. He moved closer, each step precise. She raised a barrier, but he broke it with a pulse of ard that cracked stone. Then she spoke a word that made the floor itself tremble. From the shattered vats poured liquid darkness that gathered into shapes. Humanoid but twisted, faces featureless, bodies glistening with black sheen. Darren burst into the chamber then, sword in hand. "Witcher! Deal with the spawn!" Geralt shouted. The sellsword plunged into battle, cutting at the nearest creature as Geralt pressed forward. Sparks lit the room with every clash of blade and magic. The mage's eyes glowed brighter, her voice rising in fury. "You can't stop what's already begun. The circle is eternal." Geralt leapt the fallen debris, closing the distance. He caught her staff with his sword, twisting it from her grip, then drove his elbow into her chest. She staggered back, gasping, but even as she fell, she smiled. "You've delayed us, Witcher," she whispered. "That's all." blood of the wolf runs through the rivers now." Before he could move, she spoke another word, an ancient one, and her body disintegrated into ash. The runes guttered out, leaving only silence. Darren stumbled to his side, blood streaking his sleeve. What did she mean? Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. "The mutagens. She's poisoned the water." He walked to one of the shattered vats. The residue within shimmered faintly, thin as oil, already seeping into the cracks of the floor. From here, it flows to the valley streams. Banard's heart will carry it across the continent. Darren's voice was grim. "Then everyone who drinks will change," Geralt finished. They watched as the last of the alchemical glow faded. Snow began to drift through the broken windows, settling on the mage's ashes. By dawn, the tower was nothing but ruin. The fires they set burned high, their smoke curling above Banard like a dark omen. The city woke to panic as mages and guards poured into the streets, shouting of sabotage and witcher treachery. Geralt and Darren rode hard before the sun rose fully, taking the northern road. Behind them, bells tolled in warning. They stopped only once at the ridge above the valley. From there, they could see the rivers below, thin silver lines cutting through the white landscape, gleaming faintly with an unnatural shimmer. Darren's face was pale. "It's already begun, hasn't it?" Geralt nodded. "It spreads in the veins of the world now. And there's no way to stop it?" "There's always a way," Geralt said, though his tone held no conviction. They rode on into the cold, snow swirling about them. Ahead lay the wilderness of the north, endless and gray, and beyond it, chaos. Cities poisoned, beasts reborn, men turning to monsters under the guise of progress. As dusk fell, Geralt looked to the horizon. Somewhere beyond that line of light, he thought, other witchers would see the same sickness in the rivers? And no. The age of their kind was ending once more. But the Wolf of Rivia still rode. And while he drew breath, the hunt would not cease. The wind off the northern steppes came like the breath of winter itself, cutting through cloak and mail. Geralt and Darren pressed on along the snow-clad road that curved northward toward Kaer Morhen. The world behind them was burning. The river valleys gleamed faintly at night, poisoned by the glow of mutagenic fire. No place in the continent would remain untouched if that corruption spread. For the first time in days, Geralt spoke. Kaer Morhen lies beyond the Blue Mountains. If there's still strength in the schools, they'll gather there. Vesemir's halls will need to stand again. Darren adjusted his reins, shivering. And if it's too late? Geralt's eyes remained fixed ahead. Then we build something new on the ashes. The land grew harsher as they climbed. Snow deepened, the trees thinned, and ice crusted the rocks in sheets. By evening they reached a ridge overlooking a valley where the ruins of a watchtower jutted from the white plain. Smoke curled faintly from its broken chimney. "Someone's there," Darren murmured. Geralt dismounted. "A fire means life, or something pretending to be alive." They advanced cautiously. Inside the tower's hollow shell, a small fire burned beneath the remains of a collapsed roof. A figure crouched near it, wrapped in tattered furs. When Geralt's shadow crossed the flame, the figure looked up, revealing a familiar medallion at his throat, a bear's head tarnished by time. "Easy, Wolf," the man rasped. "You look like death walking." Geralt lowered his sword slightly. "I might say the same, Merton." The Bear School Witcher smiled faintly, a smile full of weariness. "Didn't think I'd ever see another of us again." "What brings you this far north?" Geralt gestured to the fire. Mutagens spreading through the rivers. Witcher blood used to bind them. You've seen it? Merton's smile faded. Aye, the water here glows by moonlight. Village is empty. Folk changed or dead. Some beasts turned clever. He poked the fire absently. Whatever's been unleashed, it's feeding on what's left of the world. Darren crouched near the door, watching the snow drift outside. We need to reach Kaer Morhen, he said. If the old fortress still stands, maybe... It stands, Merton interrupted. Barely. A handful of your kind shelter there, I heard. But they're sick, Wolf. I passed one of them last week near the pass. His eyes had gone black as pitch. He begged me to kill him before the change finished. Geralt said nothing. He stared into the flames until their reflection flickered like blood in his eyes. Then we ride at first light, he said. They crossed the high pass 2 days later. Snow lashed their faces. The wind howled like wolves around the cliffs. Once, Darren's horse lost its footing and nearly went over the edge, saved only by Geralt's quick hand on the reins. The cold gnawed through armor and cloth alike, turning breath to mist. When at last they saw Kaer Morhen, it rose like a black wound in the mountainside. The fortress stood in ruin, its walls broken, its gates half buried in snow. Once, it had been the cradle of the wolf school, where boys learned sword and sign in the agony of the trials. Now only ghosts lingered there. They dismounted at the gate. The courtyard lay silent but for the whisper of falling snow. Half-frozen corpses littered the ground. Bandits, perhaps, or travelers who had come seeking shelter and met worse than cold. Darren's hand went to his sword. You sure we're not walking into a tomb? Geralt touched the medallion at his neck. It vibrated faintly. No, there's life here still, but not much of it. He pushed the great doors open. Inside, the hall was dim and cold, the hearths dead, the banners tattered. A few torches burned along the far wall. Around them sat 3 men in armor scarred by time. Witchers. One rose when he saw Geralt. By the path, he breathed. Geralt of Rivia. Eskel, Geralt said quietly. The two clasped forearms. The warmth of that moment lasted only a breath before Eskel's expression hardened. You've seen what's happening? Geralt nodded. It started with Keldrin. The Circle took his work further. They've poisoned the rivers, turned the mutagen into a plague. Eskel's jaw tightened. We've lost 2 already. Lambert went south to find the source. Haven't heard from him in a fortnight. Geralt's gaze flicked to the other Witchers, men he didn't know, younger faces marked by the same pale scars. Then we act, gather who's left. We end this before it drowns the world. Eskel shook his head. You don't understand. The water's already in us. We've been drinking snowmelt from the peaks. It carries the same taint. Geralt froze. How long? A month, maybe more. I feel it already. Strength 1 hour, fever the next. If it reaches the trial's scars, it'll wake whatever sleeps there. He gestured toward the shadows near the stair. There, lying still upon a cot, was another Witcher. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. His skin had turned the color of ash. Geralt knelt beside him. The man's eyes fluttered open. Black, glassy, inhuman. Geralt, he whispered, it burns. The Witcher's medallion quivered violently, the hum so sharp it hurt the ears. Then the man convulsed, a scream tearing from his throat, his body twisted, bones cracking, muscles bulging. Geralt drew steel in an instant. Now! Eskel shouted. It was over in a heartbeat. The mutated Witcher lunged, roaring, strength unnatural. Geralt's sword struck deep, cleaving through ribs. The creature shuddered and collapsed. black blood pooling on the stone. The hall went silent again, save for the hiss of that blood as it touched the floor, eating into it like acid. Darren swallowed hard. Gods, if it can turn even witchers, then the circle's won, Eskel said bitterly. Geralt sheathed his sword. Not yet. He looked at the black ichor smoking on the stones. If the mutagen's in the snow, then it's in the mountains. The source must be close, an alchemical spring or a lab feeding into the melt. Eskel met his gaze. You mean to find it? Geralt nodded. Burn it, all of it. They left before dawn, following the frozen stream that wound from Kaer Morhen's cliffs. The path led through ravines veiled in mist where the water beneath the ice glowed faintly, pulsing with green light. After hours of climbing, they found it, a cavern mouth hidden behind a curtain of icicles. Inside, the air reeked of alchemy, metal, acid, and blood. Crystals lined the walls, feeding the glow that spilled into the snow outside. At the cavern's heart lay a pool of black water bubbling softly. Pipes of silver ran into the stone, channeling the corruption into the veins of the mountain. And upon the far ledge, hunched over a cauldron, worked a figure in ragged robes. When he turned, Geralt felt the chill deepen. It was Lambert. His eyes burned with feverish light, his skin veined in green. Geralt, he said, voice raw, you shouldn't have come. Darren drew his blade, but Geralt raised a hand. What have they done to you? Not them, Lambert said with a trembling smile. Me? I thought I could stop it. Brew a cure. But the mutagen doesn't cure. It remakes. He stepped closer, the cauldron's light casting monstrous shadows on his face. You'll have to kill me, brother, before it finishes. Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. There's another way. No, Lambert whispered, there isn't. He lunged. The cavern exploded into motion. Steel clashed against steel, sparks lighting the dark. Lambert fought like the man Geralt had once known, fierce, unyielding. But there was madness in his strikes, a strength that bent the blade's edge. Geralt blocked, turned, parried. Forgive me, he said, and drove his sword home. Lambert's blade fell from his grasp. His mouth opened in a silent breath as the light left his eyes. When Geralt withdrew the sword, black blood hissed on the steel. Darren stepped forward. It's done. Geralt shook his head. No, look. The cauldron overflowed, its contents boiling. The pool beneath surged higher, spreading across the cavern floor. Geralt snatched a vial from his belt, the last of his neutralizer, and hurled it into the black water. For an instant, the glow flared bright as lightning, then vanished. The cave shuddered, the sound of collapse echoing through the mountains. They ran, snow cascading around them as the cavern imploded. When they reached the ridge, dawn was breaking over the peaks. Behind them, a plume of smoke and steam rose into the sky. Geralt stood watching until the tremors ceased. The mountains were quiet again. Eskel's voice echoed in his mind. The water's already in us. Perhaps it was already too late. Yet as the light touched the snow, the glow faded. The rivers below ran silver once more. For now. Geralt turned to Darren, eyes weary but steady. We ride south. The circle may still have roots elsewhere. Darren nodded. And if they don't? Geralt mounted Roach, glancing toward the endless horizon. Then we hunt whatever comes next. The wind rose, carrying the scent of thawing snow and far-off smoke. The wolf of Rivia rode on, the last of his kind still standing against the tide, his shadow long upon the white world. The days that followed were haunted by silence. The snow melted slow and sullen in the high passes. trickling down into rivers that no longer glowed green, but still carried a faint, unnatural shimmer. When the sun struck them, Geralt and Darren rode through the thaw, their path winding south across fields, turning to mud and forests, where frost still clung stubbornly to the bark. The mountains receded behind them, blue and distant, like the memory of a wound not yet healed. For a time they spoke little. The death of Lambert had left a hollowness in Geralt that words could not fill. The Witcher's thoughts were heavy with all he had seen: Keldrin's madness, Ithline's arrogance, the Circle's perversion of the trials. Their poison had seeped into the world, and even if the immediate threat had been burned away in the caverns beneath Kaer Morhen, he knew corruption did not die easily. Like a weed, it returned, fed by greed and human folly. They camped one evening by a riverbank where reeds whispered in the dusk. The air smelled of thawing earth. Darren crouched near the fire, his sword across his knees. "It's strange," he said quietly. "We've killed men, monsters, things I don't even have names for, and yet it feels as though nothing's changed." Geralt stirred the fire with a stick. "Because men don't change," he said. "Only the faces, the greed, the hunger, they stay the same. Keldrin thought to make a better world, and the mages thought to own it. Between them, they nearly destroyed it." Darren nodded slowly. "Then what now? You said we'd hunt whatever comes next. What if what comes next is us?" Geralt looked into the flames. "Then we hunt ourselves if we must." A wolf howled somewhere beyond the hills. The sound carried through the dusk, lonely and low, and it seemed to Geralt that the earth itself was answering. They reached the foothills of Temeria by week's end. Villages dotted the valleys once more, small places clinging to life after a harsh winter. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the smell of baked bread drifted from the inns that dotted the roads. Yet even here, peace was a fragile thing. At the first settlement they entered, the people drew back at the sight of Geralt's medallion. Mothers pulled children indoors, a man spat on the ground, and muttered a prayer. Geralt was used to it, but Darren's jaw tightened. "They owe you their lives," he said under his breath. "Half this land would be ash without what you've done." Geralt shook his head. "Folk don't remember who saves them, only what frightens them. To them, I'm still a relic of something better forgotten." He led Roach through the muddy street toward the inn. The sign above the door read "The Hollow Boar," its paint flaking, but the smell of stew wafted from within. They took a table near the hearth. The innkeep approached, cautious but not unfriendly. "Food?" he asked. "Aye," Geralt said. "An ale, for two." The man nodded, eyes darting to the swords on Geralt's back. "Not much monster work left these days," he said quietly. "Folks say the Witchers drove them all off." Geralt's mouth twitched. "Folks say many things." When the food came, they ate in silence. Around them, the low murmur of conversation rose and fell. At another table, two farmers whispered about strange sightings upriver. Deer with black eyes, fish that gleamed like metal beneath the water. Geralt listened without looking up. Darren noticed his stillness. "The mutagen?" Geralt nodded. "Residue, maybe. The rivers can't cleanse themselves in a season. So it starts again. It never stopped." They left before dawn, following the river northward. The path grew wilder as they rode, the air damp with mist. By noon they reached a clearing where the water pooled deep and dark beneath leaning willows. The surface shimmered faintly, the same sickly hue Geralt had come to dread. He dismounted, crouching at the bank. The medallion quivered weakly. He drew a knife and cut his palm, letting a drop of blood fall into the water. The reaction was immediate. The surface hissed and black veins spread outward before fading again. Still active, he muttered. Dormant, but alive. Darren frowned. Can it be stopped? Not here. The rivers run too far. We need to find the source. Didn't we already? Geralt looked up at the mountains faintly visible in the distance. We found one source. The circle was more than one tower, more than one hand. This was no single scheme. It was a network, and we've only severed one head. The sellsword cursed softly. Then what hope is there? Geralt wiped the knife clean and stood. Hope's a habit, like vengeance. Both keep you moving. They followed the river for another day, tracing its bends through fields of thawing snow. Late in the afternoon, they came upon a bridge where a caravan stood halted, wagons overturned. Corpses lay in the mud, their faces pale and slick with blackened veins. The smell of rot hung heavy. Geralt examined one of the bodies. Merchants, he said, carrying something they shouldn't. He pried open a crate. Inside were vials of dark liquid, mutagen, still pulsing faintly, as though alive. The glass bore the mark of Bon Ard, Darren swore. They're trading it now? Of course they are, Geralt said. Anything that kills can also be sold. He gathered the vials, stacked them at the bridge's edge, and doused them in oil. When he set the torch to them, they flared green, hissing as they burned. The flames turned the sky a sickly hue before dying down to gray smoke. Darren watched. You can't burn every shipment, every drop. The circle may be dead, but greed isn't. Geralt sheathed his sword. Then I'll burn what I can reach. That night, they camped near the ruins of an old chapel by the road. The wind whispered through the arches, carrying the scent of rain. Geralt sat cleaning his blades, their edges reflecting the firelight. Darren slept, his head resting against his pack. For a long while the Witcher simply listened to the night, the creak of branches, the soft rush of the river, the heartbeat of a world struggling to heal. He thought of Kaer Morhen, of Eskel's tired eyes and the graves in the snow. He thought of the words he had seen in Keldrin's notes. The blood of the wolf binds all. Perhaps the circle had been right about one thing. Witchers were bound to this world, whether it hated them or not. Their blood had always carried power. Maybe now it would carry something else. The cost of every choice men had made in trying to master what should never have been touched. When dawn came, the rain had washed the ashes of their fire into the earth. Geralt mounted Roach without a word. Darren followed silent, his expression grim but resolute. They rode south again toward Temeria's heart, where rumor said other fires were burning. Labs rekindled, merchants trading vials of night-colored elixir, kings whispering of armies made of steel and mutagen. The circle might have fallen, but the dream it sold had already taken root in men's hearts. As they crested a hill, the sky broke open in a streak of light. The sun rose over the land, pale and cold, but the first warmth of spring stirred in the wind. Darren glanced at him. Think the world can be saved? Geralt's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. No, he said softly, but it can be protected for a while. They rode on through the awakening fields, two silhouettes against the morning sun, a witcher and a soldier, bound by the same weariness, the same purpose. Behind them, the rivers whispered, and the land slept uneasily, waiting for what would come next. The wolf of Rivia did not look back. He rode where the roads bled into shadow, where monsters still hid and men still dreamed of power. His blade was steady, his eyes hard, and though the age of witchers was ending, the hunt, the endless, necessary hunt, would go on. For as long as men made monsters, someone would need to slay them. And until that day ended, the White Wolf would ride.